بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا اللهم زدنا علما إنك أنت عليم الحكيم اللهم اجعل هذه المحاضرة حجة لنا لا حجة علينا يا رب العالمين أما بعد. Brothers and sisters in Islam, this is a brief introduction, if you will, to child custody law in Islam. It's a vast topic. It's one of extreme importance in our communities and in other communities. So, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to cover some of the things, not every single topic, because there are many topics, or there are many issues within this topic that we can discuss. But we're going to keep it brief as much as possible, but at the same time, try to cover the essentials that we need. Before we get started, it's also very important, as I mentioned yesterday, that about the maqasid al-sharia, the intent behind Islamic legislation. In Islamic legislation, there's something known as the dururiyat al-khams, the five necessities, if you will, the five things that are necessary for a Muslim to know and understand. Islam came to preserve five things. And from those five things, the first thing is preservation of the religion. Preservation of the religion. The next one is preservation of the lineage. Preservation of one's lineage. And therefore, fornication or premarital affairs are not permissible in Islam because this is, as they say, yudi an-nasab. It's something that will break off the lineage. Preservation of the wealth. Preserving the wealth is also very important, and for that, there are people that are responsible for overlooking the wealth of minors, overlooking the wealth of those who are not responsible with their money. And likewise, hifdul nafs, preservation of the self. Therefore, it's impermissible to use drugs or anything like that that will cause harm to yourself. And likewise, it's impermissible to harm others as well. Well, hifdul ird, and preservation of one's honor. And preservation of one's honor is something of utmost importance to a Muslim. And going over this subject here, it was requested by me, by one of the brothers, that, this is an issue that many people may not be aware of, or maybe some may be aware of it, but they're not really sure of how things are supposed to go. The reality is that we live here in a way they can, and if they don't want to, they have an option not to. The reality of it is, for a Muslim, there is no option for you. In our religion, when Allah and His Messenger decree something, then we have to take it, and we have to accept it. However, sometimes people may be oppressed. Sometimes the women can oppress the husbands or the men, and sometimes the men can oppress the women, and a lot of this oppression comes from people not really knowing their rights and not necessarily having knowledge of that issue. So inshallah ta'ala, today we're going to talk about it in some detail in hopes that this could open up a conversation of potentially establishing these type of things in our communities. So the first thing people do is not run to the courtroom, rather they come to the religious leaders in the communities and help deal with some of these affairs that we need to deal with. Al-Hidana, the word custody in Islam is called Al-Hidana. And as I mentioned yesterday, anytime there is a term or word used in the Sharia, first the ulama in Islam, they give you a linguistic meaning, and the next they give you a more technical meaning for the word. The term hadana or hidana, as some of them say, is from the word al-hidni wa huwa al-jambu. Linguistically, the word hadana, it means al-jamb, in other words, to keep close. لأن المربي يضم الطفل إلى حضنه. This is because the one who is responsible for the child keeps the child close to them. It's from the word hidn, which means the side or to keep close. A technical term, or more technical term for this word here, هي حفظ الصغير. This is the technical term. هي حفظ الصغير ونحوه عما يضره وتربيته بعمل مصالحه. And what this means is that the technical meaning of the word hadana, it means to preserve the child, to preserve the child. Protect that child from anything that will harm that child. Educating that child and teaching that child the things that will benefit him, or doing the things that will benefit that child. So, as was mentioned about hadana, it says, وَهِيَ تَجِبُ الْحَضَانَةُ لِحِفْظِ الصَّغِيرِ وَمَعْتُوًا. Hadana in al-Islam is something that is obligatory. Preserving and protecting the children is something that is obligatory. And likewise, a ma'tu. A ma'tu is a child or a person that is mentally challenged. A person that is mentally challenged and is not capable of tending to their needs, they take the ruling as a child with regards to nurture and protecting them. Is that clear? طيب. So with regards to this, and likewise a person, mentally challenged, we'll use that. لِأَنَّهُمْ يَضِيعُونَ بِتَرْكِهَا. And this is because a child or a mentally challenged person, if you don't take care of them, they will be left stranded and helpless. Right or wrong? So in that regard, the child and the mentally challenged person take the same ruling in this issue of hadana. However, we're going to see as time progresses how they separate in certain avenues or certain ways. So far, is there any questions?
No, to be something after.
Yeah, inshallah. طيب. فوجبت إن جاء له من الحلقة والضياع. When you have the child custody here, the purpose of which, as was mentioned, is to protect the children from harm, any harm coming their way. And likewise, you can find this being protected or mentioned in the Sharia in Al-Islam, as Allah Jalla wa Ala says in the Quran, فَتَقَبَّلَهَا رَبُّهَا بِقَبُولٍ حَسَنًا وَأَنْبَتَهَا نَبَاتًا حَسَنًا وَكَفَّلَهَا زَكَرِيَّا. And this is in Surah Ali Imran, verse number 37. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse is actually talking about the wife of Imran when she had a child. The child's name was Maryam. And Maryam was given to Zakaria to take care of. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in here, so her Lord accepted from her, because she made dua for her child, Maryam. So Allah accepted that dua from her and put her in the care of Zakaria, and put the child in the care of Zakaria. And as mentioned here, جَعْلَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى كَافِلًا لَهَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Zakaria kafilan li Maryam. In other words, to protect her when she was a child. To protect her when she was a child. مُلْتَزِمًا بِمَصَالِحِهَا. And he was diligent. He was diligent in caring for her needs and ensuring that the things that she needed were taken care of. فَكَانَتْ فِي حَضَانَتِهِ تَحْتَ رِعَايَتِهِ. And she was with him underneath his care while Zakaria cared for her. وجاء في مسند إمام أحمد وسنن أبي داود أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال للأم. And the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, with regards to hadana and child custody for a child that is young, the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he said to the mother, he said, أنت أحق به من لم تنكه. He said to the mother, you have more of a right to the child so long as you do not get married. So long as you do not get married. قال أبو بكر الصديق. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, رضي الله تعالى عنه, He said, يُخَاطِبُ وَالِدُ ibn al-Mahdun. In his statement that he's about to make, he's speaking to the father of the child. He says to him, رِيحُهَا وَشَمُّهَا وَلُطْفُهَا خَيْرٌ لَهُ مِنْكَ. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he said to the father that the smell of the mother, her gentleness with the child is better than yours. In other words, better than the father. The mother has these attributes that are better than the father. وقال ابن Abbas. Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, رِيحُ الْأُمِّ وَفِرَاشُهَا وَحِجْرُهَا خَيْرٌ لَهُ مِنَ الْأَبْ حَتَّى يَشِبَّ وَيَخْتَارَ لِنَفْسِهِ. Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said that the smell of the mother, the bed of the mother, the lap of the mother is better for the child than the father up until the child shabba. In other words, when they become a shab, younger in age, or get older to the point where they can pick for themselves. To the point where they can pick for themselves. So then, so far, in the beginning of Hadana, the first we have to go through all of this, how it's been established, what's understood by it, how we can use it, or how it's used. The next issue we're going to discuss now is who has more of a right to Hadana. Okay? Is that clear? In other words, the mother and the father are separated. Who has and you have a young child. Let's make it scenario based. We have a young child, 1 year old, 2 years old. The mother and father, they separate. The mother and father, they separate. They have a 2-year-old child. Who has more of a right to the child right off the bat? The mother. So right now, the fuqaha in al-Islam, they mention steps in which who does a succession go to? If they're not here, then them. If they're not here, then them, so on and so forth. Now, some of you may be aware of this. Some of you may not be aware of it. However, depending on where you read, the order may differ. But this is a general order. Don't say, oh, brother, I read another book. It said this goes before that. This is just to give you a concept of how the Sharia actually works. There are things that are in place in order for a particular reason. However, some of the scholars may differ as to some of the order, the tartib, some of the order here. However, this is just in general. أَحَقُّ النَّاسِ بِالطِّفْلِ أُمُّهُ. So the one that has the most right to that child first and foremost is the mother. طيب. ثُمَّ, after her, ثُمَّ أُمَّهَاتُهَا, then her mothers. So what does that mean? We have a child, and the child's with the mother. The mother passes away. Who gets the child next? The mother's mother. The mother's mother. But they didn't say the mother's mother, or said the mother's mother. Who gets the child? The mother's mother. وَإِنْ أَعْلَوْنَ. Even if it goes up, and if something happens to her, then it goes to the mother's 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 mother. All the way up. Is that clear? طيب. After that, if that's exercised, then the next person is ثُمَّ الْأَبْ. Then it goes to the father. This is one order. Are we clear on that? All right. Then after it goes to the father, something happens to the father. Obviously, something happens to the mother, the grandmothers. Boom, now it goes to the father. Something happens to the father. ثُمَّ أُمَّهَاتُهُ. Then his mother. ثُمَّ الْجَدْ. Then if his mother is not there, then it goes to the grandfather. Then it goes to the who? The grandfather. The grandfather of the baby. Right? On the father's side. ثُمَّ أُمَّهَاتُهُ. Then the mother of the grandfather on up. Then after those extremes, after both of those are gone, there's no one else. Then the child goes to al-ukht min al-abawain. The father from the mother and the father. What does that mean? Or the sister from the mother and the father. What does that mean? Right now, we have a specific family structure, right? We have brothers and sisters who have the same mother and the same father, right? Yes or no? So then, that child, after everything else has been exercised, that child then would go to the sister who shares the same mother and father as that baby. Is that clear? You look confused. It's clear? So if something happens to the grandparents once the child is now going to the sister, he has an option. Which sister? The sister from the same mother and the same father. This is called the ukht shaqiqa. Ukht shaqiqa. A shaqiqa, it means a sister from the same mother and father. طيب. If the child doesn't have a sister from the same mother and father, then the child will go to the sister al-ukht li'ab, the sister, and they have the same father but different mothers. Is that clear? This order here, and then after that, then it goes to the sister that they share the same mother. Well, why is that? Because essentially this is the way inheritance is broken down. This is the way Islamic inheritance is broken down. The siblings with the same mother and father, they get more. Then it goes to the sibling with the same dad. Then a sibling with the same mom. So essentially, this right here was kind of broken down in a similar way. Is that clear? طيب. وَكُلُّ هَذَا لِقُوَّةِ قَرَابَتُهَا. And all of this is due to the reason why the sister with the same mother and father is put forth first, because they have a stronger connection to the child.
This is on either side?
What do you mean either side?
Mother and father on either side of the baby's father and the mom on either side?
I'm confused. What we're talking about here is the ukht, the sister. So we have the child, 2 years old. The child has an older sister. Okay? This sister is his sister because they share the same mother and father. Okay, so let me break it down again. We have a sister who shares the same mother and father as the child. Then you have a sister who shares the same father but different mothers of the child. Then we have a sister that shares the same mother as the child but not the same father. So the order of closeness to that child first is the one who shares the same mother and father with the child. It's first. And then second, the one that shares the same father. And then third, the one that shares the same mother. This is the way it's broken down. Is that clear? طيب. And so after that, وَنَصَّ عَلَيْهِ Ahmed. And this is something that Imam Ahmad, he mentioned. And right now, primarily most of our studies in these issues was predicated from the school of Imam Ahmad and his school of jurisprudence. Then after that, ثُمَّ الْعَمَّةِ. Then after that comes the father's sister. Is that clear? So we have the child, the aunt, but the aunt on the father's side, the paternal aunt, because she is closer to the child than the khala. The khala is the maternal aunt. However, some of the ulama, they differ with these arrangements, but this is just a general introductory way of explaining it. Thumma aqrab fa aqrab. Then after that, any woman that is closer to the child after that will generally get the child without going into too much detail. Are we clear on this so far? Fadl.
I want to be clear on something. All this that you're talking about right now.
Let me get to that, because I think I know what you're about to ask me.
I'm about to ask you is because of the age, the young age that they are. Does it change once the child is older?
You didn't let me get into it.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Fadl, you can send out to me.
How is the father's sister closer than the mother's sister?
They differ on that because the lineage in Islam, when a child inherits, right, the child takes the name of the father. So, for example, if your name is Abdullah Muhammad and your wife, her name is Fatima Ismail, for example. When you have that child's going to take your name, the father's name. So in general, the lineage from the father's side is generally stronger than the lineage to the mother's side for the child. And if we were to study Islamic inheritance, if you have grandchildren from your daughter, they may not inherit from you. Right? This is not to get into Islamic inheritance, but I'm just saying the lineage from the father's side is stronger than the lineage than the mother's side. Now, however, some of the scholars do differ on that issue that you just made. But I'm just making an argument for this case here. Okay?
So when a woman gets married, she keeps her father's name no matter what.
She keeps her father's name no matter what. We don't find that this is something, I don't know where that practice came from, changing the name when you get married. I don't know if that's an Islamic practice. Allah, I'm not familiar with that. If somebody is, you can bring me some information. I'm not familiar with that. Tayyib. So then, once that has been established thus far, now the next issue is who does not get the child? Right? We just mentioned who can get the child. Is that in an absolute sense? The next issue here, as was mentioned, that la hadanata li fasiqin. That if a person is a sinful person, then there's no hadana for that person. So let's say, for example, if that mother, there's la hadana li fasiqin wa la kafirin. There's no child care or custody for a sinful person, nor a person that is not Muslim. And it says, La hidanata li fasiqin. Why is there no custody for a sinful person? لِإِنَّهُ لَا يُثَقُ بِهِ فِيهَا. Because that sinful person cannot be trusted with the definition of the word hadana that we mentioned earlier. What's the definition? Did anyone write that down? The definition of hadana? What was it? أحسنت. حفظ الصغير ونحوه بما عما يضره. طيب. So, preserving that child or something similar to the child, like a mentally challenged person, from those things that will harm them. What could be the most harmful thing to a child? Protecting their religion. Kufr. And a sinful person, as the ulama mentioned, the sinful person can't be trusted that they're going to carry out the religious obligations that is upon them in terms of teaching what ta'lim and teaching the child and so on and so forth. And so then they say, وَلَا حَضَانَةَ لِكَافِرٍ عَلَى مُسْلِمٍ. And there's no custody for a non-Muslim over a Muslim. There's no custody for a non-Muslim over a Muslim. So if you got a brother is married to a sister, and they get a divorce, or maybe he married to a non-Muslim woman, and they get a divorce, or maybe he's married to her, and she's Muslim, but she passes away, but her mother is not Muslim. There's no custody in Islam. There's no custody for the non-Muslim over a Muslim. This is in general. And they say, why is that? لِأَنَّهُ أَوْلَى بِعَدْمَ الْإِسْتِحْقَاقِ مِنَ الْفَاسِقِ. Because if we don't believe that the sinful person is going to carry out the religious responsibility for that child, then what about a person that's not Muslim? It's even worse. Sah? It's even worse. طيب. And likewise, لا حضانة it says لا حضانة لمزوج لا حضانة لمتزوج أو لمزوجة بأجنبي من محضون. And there's no custody for a woman if she's married in this case. So her custody is then removed once she becomes married. طيب. This is something that is important to note because there's some detail with regards to this issue. وَمِنْ حِينَ عَقْدٍ. So if a mother, say she has her child is 1.5, 2 years old, and she gets married. Once she signs that contract of marriage, she loses her right for custody of the child. وَلَوْ رَضِيَ الزَّوْجِ. And according to Imam Ahmad, he says even if the husband is say, it's okay, you can have the child, she still does not take the child. This is the position of Imam Ahmad. This is a statement. However, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he mentions about this issue in particular. Him and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, they say, أن حضانة الأم لا تسقط إذا رضي الزوج بالحضانة الطفل لأمه. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah and Imam Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, they said that the custody of the mother is not removed if the husband is comfortable with the mother still caring for the child. Or not the husband, rather the father. If the father is still comfortable with the mother caring for the child, then the custody is not removed. Is that clear? Or not? طيب. قال الشيخ عبد الرحمن السعدي رحمه الله تعالى. He says, الصحيح أنه إذا رضي الزوج وحقها باق. He says, Abd al-Rahman al-Sa'di, if the husband is happy with the child still being with the mother, then her right remains intact. Her right remains intact. Is that clear? And this is based on وَهَذَا قِيَاسَ الْمَذْهَبِ فِي جَمِيعِ الْحُقُوقِ. He said, and this here is a type of analytical deduction that is used in dealing with the rights of anyone. Period. If a person is generally happy with it, then you can have it. Or if you're okay with it, then it's okay. Does that make sense? طيب. وَمَتَى زَالَتِ الْمَوَانِعْ مِنْهُمْ. However, if those issues are removed, if those prohibitors are removed, say for example, a person that's in the line to have custody of the child, if certain prohibitors are removed, such as aslam kafir. If the grandmother was a Muslim and then she becomes Muslim, then that right goes back to the grandmother, for example, right? Or addala fasik, or if the one that was a sinful person, they made tawbah and they started to get their life together, then that right is returned back to them. Or aqla majnoon, or if that mentally challenged person who was also along those chain, if they their situation improves, then their right is likewise returned to them. وَعَادَ حَقَّهُمْ مِنَ الْحَضَانَةِ. And then their right is returned to them in terms of their right is returned to them because the prohibitor is now removed. And likewise, the woman or the mother that got married, as soon as she gets divorced, her right goes back to her in terms of custody. So for example, if a man takes his child because the woman gets married to someone else and the child's 2-3 years old and she's married to this person for 6 months, a year, they get divorced, that right goes back to her. Is that clear? Or no? Well, inshallah, it's clear. طيب. The next issue here, it says, وَلَا حَضَانَةَ لِإِمْرَأَةٍ مُزَوَّجَةٍ لِأَجْنَبِي. We already mentioned that there's no custody for a woman once she marries someone other than the father. Okay? In general. قال ابن منذر. Ibn Mundir is from the scholars of the past. He said, أَجْمَعَ عَلَى هَذَا كُلُّ مَنْ أَحْفَظُ عَنْهُ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ. He said that this is almost like an ijma', a scholarly consensus based on everyone that we understand from the scholars of Al-Islam. However, pay attention. Ibn Mundir, when he mentions ijma', sometimes his ijma' may not necessarily be ijma'. And the brother Saeed is going to talk about that later. Ijma', scholarly consensus. Scholarly consensus in Islam is a proof in a religion. But sometimes he may say that something is an ijma'. He said that anyone who we memorize this issue from Ahlul Ilm, from the scholars, they say that this is a consensus on this issue. وَقَضَى بِهِ شُرَيْحٌ. And Shurayh from the Sahaba, he also ruled in this affair that the mother, once she marries another man that's not the father of the child, then the hadan is removed, the custody is removed from her. He said that this was a ruling that Shurayh gave, and likewise is a statement of Imam Malik and Imam Shafi'i. He mentioned three people. It mentions three people here from the Salaf that held this position. However, you still can't say that it's an ijma' unless they say that it's a scholarly consensus on the issue. طيب. So then, the next issue here, with regards to this, first of all, do we have any questions on it so far? Or is it clear? Huh? طيب. The next issue is somewhat kind of along the lines that you were talking about. The issue here is إذا بلغ الغلام 7 سنين خير بين أبويه. You asked a question earlier about, well, what about the child if they're young, when they get a certain age? Can he, to the end of it, how does that work? In Islam, it mentions that if the boy, pay attention, the first issue here we're talking about are the boys. Once a boy reaches the age of 7 years old, khuyira baina abawayhi. Once a boy reaches the age of 7, then he chooses between the parents who he wants to go with, who he wants to live with. وَإِذَا لَمْ يَكُنْ مَعْتُوءًا. This is if the boy is not mentally challenged. If the boy is mentally challenged, who does he go with? Does anyone know? He stays with the mother, no matter how old they are. Why is that? Because the ulama in al-Islam, they say that the mother is ashfaqu bihi, because the mother is going to be more gentle and show that person more love and care than the father would in general. This is what the scholars of Islam have decided years ago on these issues. Anytime a person is mentally challenged, they always go to the mother, no matter what. طيب. Then it mentions فَمَنْ اخْتَارَ مِنْهُمَا فَهُوَ أَوْلَى بِهِ. And it says whoever that child picks from among the mother and the father, then that person has more of a right to that child. وَقَضَى بِذَلِكَ عُمَرْ. And we find that Umar ibn Khattab, this was one of the rulings during his khilafah. And likewise Ali ibn Abi Talib, as we learned about him yesterday in terms of him being a judge. This is what he chose. And likewise Shurayh also gave the same type of ruling. Let's say this later or just for now? We'll talk about this later, inshallah. And likewise, this is the madhab of Imam Al-Shafi'i. This is also the madhab or the way of Imam Al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala. It says, what was also reported on Abi Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and the Nabiy sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So someone may ask, well, what's the dalil? What's the dalil that a child gets to pick once they turn 7 years of age? What's the evidence to support that? That's a legitimate question, right? So it says in a hadith that was reported by Abi Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and the Nabiy sallallahu alayhi wa sallam khayyara gulaman bayna abihi wa ummihi. That the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he told a child once they reached the age of 7 that he made him choose between his mother and father or who he wanted to live with. And this hadith was reported by Sa'id wa Imam al-Shafi'i wa fi lafdin an Abi Hurairah qala ja'at imra'atun ila Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. There was a woman who came to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam faqalat ya Rasulullah. She said, "O Messenger of Allah, inna zawji yuridu an yadhhaba bi ibni." She said, my husband wants to take my son and leave. He wants to take my son and go. وَقَدْ سَقَانِ مِنْ بِئْرٍ أَبِي عِتْبَةَ. But my son, I use him because he gives me drink from the well. وَقَدْ نَفَعَنِي, and he benefits me. He's a benefit to me. Her son is a benefit to her. فَقَالَ لَهُ نَبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. And so the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said to the boy, هَذَا أَبُوكَ وَهَذِهِ أُمُّكَ فَخُذْ بِيَدِ أَيِّهِمَا شِئْتَ. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said to the boy, he said, this is your father and this is your mother. Take the hand of whichever one you want. So فَأَخَذَ بِيَدِ أُمِّهِ فَانْطَلَقَتْ بِهِ. And so the boy grabbed the hand of his mother and she took her son and she left with her son. Rawahu Abu Dawood. And this hadith was reported by Abu Dawood. وَلِأَنَّهُ إِجْمَاعُ الصَّحَابَةِ. In this issue here, they say it's a consensus amongst the Sahaba that this is what takes place. There is a consensus among the Sahaba that this is what takes place. Well, likewise, رُوِيَ عَنْ عُمَرَ أَنَّهُ خَيَّرَ غُلَامًا بَيْنَ أَبِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ. And it was also reported by Umar ibn Khattab that he did this for another boy between him, the boy, and his mother. And likewise, we find that Umarata al-Jarmi أنه قال, and he was a child, he said, خَيَّرَنِي عَلِيٌّ بَيْنَ عَمِّي وَأُمِّي. He said, my Ali ibn Abi Talib made me choose between my father's brother, my uncle, or staying with my mother. وَكُنْتُ ibn sab'in أو ثمان. And he said, and I was either 7 or 8 years old. And says, وَرَوِيَ نَحْوَ ذَلِكَ عَنْ أَبِي هُرَيْرَةَ. Report similar from Abu Hurairah on the same issue. وَهَذِهِ قَصَص لَمْ تُنْكَرْ. And these stories here, and this is something that's very important in Islam to understand. These stories here, it says that we don't find anyone making inkar. We don't find anyone from the Salaf, this is very important. We don't find anyone from the Salaf making inkar saying this is not correct. So based on that, فَكَانَتْ إِجْمَاعًا. And therefore, if you don't find any of the scholars of the past saying, no, we don't agree with it, then this is basically a scholarly consensus, which in turn is a ruling in Al-Islam. Is that clear? طيب. Now, suppose the child picks one of the parents. How should that be? In terms of visitation, in terms of this, in terms of that. Islam has legislated that for us. It says, فَإِنِ اقْتَارَ أَبَاهُ. If the boy that reaches the age of 7 chooses his father, كَانَ عِنْدَهُ لَيْلًا وَالنَّهَارًا. Then the boy stays with the father in the evening and in the daytime. Is that clear? وَإِنِ اخْتَارَ أُمُّهُ. And if that boy picks his mother, كَانَ عِنْدَهَا لَيْلًا وَعِنْدَ أَبِيهِ نَهَارًا. Then she is the child, that boy is with the mother in the evening and with the father in the daytime. Type لماذا? Why is that? So the Salaf and Al-Islam, they explain this issue. They say, لِيُعَلِّمَهُ الصِّنَاعَةَ وَالْكِتَابَ وَيُؤَدِّبَهُ. This is because when he's with his father's going to teach him how to make money, do the things to make money, how to write, and basically put him in order if he gets out of line. Is that clear? طيب. وَإِذَا اخْتَارَ غُلَامٌ أَبَاهُ كَانَ عِنْدَهُ لَيْلًا وَالنَّهَارًا. If the boy picks the father, then the boy is with the father in the day, or in the night and in the day. However, with that, لا يمنع من زيارة أمه. However, that boy is not prevented from visiting his mother. That boy is not prevented from visiting his mother. لأن منعه من ذلك إغراء بالعقوق وقطعية الرحم. Because if that boy is prevented from seeing his mother, then this will be harmful to the mother. And likewise, this is disrespect and disobedience to the parents. In terms of uquq, in terms of being non-dutiful to the parents and cutting off the family ties. And therefore, this is impermissible for the father to prevent the child from visiting the mother. وَإِن مَرِضَ However, if the child becomes sick, if the boy becomes sick, وَإِن مَرِضَ كَانَتَ الْأُمْ أَحَقُّ بِتَمْرِيدِهِ. If the boy becomes sick, then the mother has more of a right in terms of caring for him when the child is sick. فِي بَيْتِهَا, in her house. So if the boy becomes sick, then he should go to the mother's house so she can care for him. In this case, لِأَنَّهُ صَارَ بِالْمَرْءِ كَالصَّغِيرِ. Because when the person, if that boy becomes sick, then in this case he takes the ruling of a small child because he's not able to do for himself. And in this case, the mother is better with regards to tending for the children in that state. فَكَانَتَ الْأُمْ أَحَقُّ بِهِ كَالصَّغِيرِ. In this case, the mother has more right for him than the father. وَإِنْ اخْتَارَ الْأُمْ كَانَ عِنْدَهَا لَيْلًا. And if he picks the mother, once again, if the boy picks the mother, كَانَ عِنْدَهَا لَيْلًا, then he stays with her in the night. وَيَأْخُذُهُ الْأَبْ نَهَارًا. And the father takes the child in the morning or in the daytime. لِيُسَلِّمَهُ فِي مَكْتَبٍ. And that she gets the child at a designated location. They exchange the children in a designated location. Mind you, this stuff was written and put in books over 1,000 years ago. I'm sorry, 800-900 years ago. This stuff was already talked about. They meet at a designated spot to turn over the children and so on and so forth. لِأَنَّ الْقَصْدِ, the intent here is haddul gulam. The intent here is protecting and making sure that child needs are tended to. وَحَضُّهُ فِي مَا ذَكَرْنَا. And looking out for that child's best interest is what was mentioned earlier when they talked about these types of issues. فَإِنَّ الْغَلَامِ يَزُرُّ أُمَّهُ. However, when it's time for him to visit the mother, that boy, he goes to visit the mother. The mother doesn't come and get him. Rather, you take him to go visit his mother. فَسَتْرُهَا أَوْلَى. And this is because a woman in general, instead of having her come out to go take her child, a woman should be protected in her house, so on and so forth. So you take that child there to visit the mother. And likewise, وَسَتْرُ الْجَارِيَ أَوْلَى. However, if they had a little girl, then the mother would come get the little girl because the little girl has more of a right to be protected than the mother, because the mother, in this case, فَقَدْ تَخَرَّجَتْ وَعَقَلَتْ. Because the mother, she has experience in the world and she understands how things work in the world. Whereas the child, the little girl, is to be protected even more so than the mother in this case. Is that clear? طيب. فَإِنْ عَادَ فَاخْتَارَ الْآخَرِ. Say for example, we have a boy, he picks the father first. Then after a while, he stays with the father and says, you know what, Dad, she's too rough. I want to go with my mom. Does Islam allow for him to just switch like that after he said, I want to go stay with my dad, and then he changed his mind and go stay with his mother? What do you think?
Yes.
Yes. In fact, as was mentioned, it says, فَإِنْ اخْتَارَ الْآخَرْ نُقِلَ إِلَيْهِ. If the child picks the other spouse or the other parent, then that child goes to the other parent. فَإِنْ عَادَ فَاخْتَارَ الْأَوَّلْ رُدَّ إِلَيْهِ. And if he changes his mind, he goes stay with his mom. Mom, I'm cool, I'm going back with my dad. Then he has that right. The child has that right to do that. وَهَكَذَا أَبَدًا كُلَّمَا اخْتَارَ أَحَدُهُمَا رُدَّ إِلَيْهِ لِأَنَّهُ اخْتِيَارٌ شَهْوَةً لِحَظِّ نَفْسِهِ. Because when that child picks a parent to go to, they do this based on how they feel. Based on how they feel and they desire, and that child has that choice. That choice is given to that child. كَمَا يُتْبَعُ مَا يَشْتَهِهِ فِي الْمَأْكُلِ وَمَشْرُبِ. Just same way that child uses to pick food that they want to eat and drink or beverages they want to drink. That's how they can pick and choose with regards to staying with whatever parent they want. Now,
Does this also apply if the mother gets married?
no, it's not. No, we already mentioned that. If once the mother gets married, then the child goes once the child reaches the age, once the boy reaches the age of 7, he chooses who he wants to go to. If the mother gets married after the age of 7, it's no longer considered habana from that aspect. Now the child can pick who he wants to go with. طيب. Where was I? طيب. So in this case, the child selects whichever parent they want, and they can bounce back and forth wherever they want to go. فَإِن لَمْ يَخْتَرْ أَحَدُهُمَا أُقْرِعَ. If the child doesn't pick one of them, say, he can't decide who he wants to go with. The mother, I can't pick. In this case, uqri'a. In this case, there has to be a selection process. In other words, it's almost like picking a name out of a hat. Because ultimately the child cannot stay with both parents. Rather, the child has to pick one or the other. So in this case, it's almost like the child has to pick out of a hat, if that makes sense. فَإِذَا قُدِّمَ بِهَا ثُمَّ اخْتَارَ الْآخَرْ نُقِلَ إِلَيْهِ. So say, for example, he picks out the hat. I got to go with my father. And he says, I want to go with my mom. Then he can go back with his mom. Is that clear? Yes or no? طيب. The next one, it talks about the daughter. The first issue we discussed had to do with what? The boy, right? The boy, right? طيب. The next issue has to do with the daughter. وَإِذَا بَلَغَتِ الْجَارِيَةِ سَبْعًا. If the girl reaches the age of 7, if your daughter reaches the age of 7, كَانَتْ عِنْدَ أَبِيهَا, then she should be with her father. Once the girl reaches the age of 7, she should be with her father. وَلَا تُمْنَعُ الْأُمْ مِنْ زِيَارَتِهَا وَتَمْرِيدِهَا. And a mother is not prevented, she's not prevented from visiting her daughter, especially even if she's sick. She's not prevented from visiting her, but she goes to her father. She goes to her father.
You said 7?
7 years old. And we're talking about 7 on the Islamic calendar. Anytime, this is important to note, anytime we talk about age in the religion, anytime age has to do with a ruling or something in the deen, it's talking about the Islamic calendar year, not the Gregorian calendar.
Okay, so what
A Hijri calendar.
So what is the age difference ratio between the Georgian calendar?
The Gregorian calendar and the Hijri calendar depends. It might be months, it could be years, it could be...
Ahead or back? Let's say, for example...
I'll give you an example. A person will reach 7 in the Hijri calendar before they would in the Gregorian calendar. All right? So, depending on, I don't know the exact months or days or what have you, but it's important to know.
They're old, so basically they're older than what we say they are.
Yes. Yes. So it says here, إِنَّ الْغَرَضْ بِالْحَضَانَةِ الْحَضْ. The purpose of custody here is protection for that child. To protection for them and to put them in the right situation where they can be successful. وَالْحَضُّ لِلْجَارِيَةِ بَعْدَ السَّبْعِ فِي كَوْنِ عِنْدَ أَبِيهَا. That a girl, once she reaches the age of 7, she should be with her father. لِأَنَّهُ وَلِأَنَّهَا تَحْتَاجُ إِلَى حِفْظٍ. This is because the daughter, she needs someone to protect her. And who's more willing or have more of a right to protect her than her own father? It says, وَالْأَبْ أَوْلَى, because the father has more of a right. بِذَلِكَ فَإِنَّ الْأُمْ تَحْتَاجُ إِلَى مَنْ يَحْفَظُهَا وَيَصُونُهَا. And this is because the mother, she is in need of someone to take care of her and to protect her. So then who has more of a right to protect the girl other than her father? Does that make sense? طيب. إِنَّمَا تُخْتَبُ. And another reason that she goes with her father, because her father, إِنَّمَا تُخْتَبُ الْجَارِيَةُ مِنْ أَبِيهَا. That a person, when the daughter decides to get married, someone's going to come to the father to marry her, not the mother. So then it's more than, why wouldn't she be with her father? And it also mentions, لِإِنَّهُ وَلِيُّهَا. This is because the father is her wali. He is her protector and her guardian. وَمَالِكْ لِتَزْوِيجِهَا. And he has the right to offer her off in marriage and not. The father owns that right. وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِكَفَاءَتِهَا. And he is the one who knows more what type of guy is suitable to marry his daughter than anyone else. وَأَقْدَرُ عَلَى الْبَحْثِ. And the father, he's able to search for the proper person for his child. ولا يصار إلى تخييرها لأن الشرع لم يرد فيه أو به فيها. And she does not pick which parent to go with because the Sharia didn't come with that with regards to the daughter. So here's another issue. إذا كانت الجارية عند الأم أو عند الأب فإنها تكون عند ليلا. As if the girl, mind you, she's under the age of 7. Okay? So now the daughter, she's with her mother or with her father. فإنها تكون عنده ليلا ونهارا. So the child, if she's with the father, she remains with the father in the night and in the day. فإن تأديبها وتخريجها في جوف البيت. When it comes to educating and teaching the daughter, generally it should be in the house. ومن تعليمها الطبخ وغيرهما لا حاجة بها إلى إخراج منه. When it comes to teaching the daughter the things that are necessary to be a woman, some things that women usually do more so than men. I'm not saying that men can't do those things, but some things that women generally do that men maybe sometimes don't. She can also learn those things inside of the home as well. ولا تمنع أحدهما من زيارتها عند الآخر. And likewise, when it comes to visiting the mother, she is not prevented. Even if the daughter was with the father, the daughter is also not prevented from visiting her father when she's younger, under the age of 7. And likewise, the visiting the father. Does that make sense? So she's not prevented from visiting either parent. وإن مرضت فالأم حق بتمريضها في بيتها. And if she became sick, then the mother has more of a right to take care of her inside of the mother's house. Is that clear? Huh? طيب. Now we're going to move on to another issue here that is also very important. Because we have children, and sometimes as parents we may move. Right? You may move out of the country, you may move to a different city. How does that work with regards to your children and their custody? وَإِذَا أَرَادَ أَحَدُ أَبْوَيْنِ مَحْدُونَ سَفَرًا لِبَلَدٍ بَعِيدٍ مَسَافَةَ الْقَصْرِ. So the ulama in Islam, they say that if one of the parents decides to move to a place that is far, and when they mean by far, they determine far by saying you have to shorten your salat if you're going to go there. So it could be a city that's far away or even to another country. It says, فَأَكْثَرَ لِيَسْلُكُهُ وَهُوَ الطَّرِيقَةُ. And if he's going to this place, and the pathway to get to that place is safe. If the pathway to get to this place is safe, and a person is going there to move there, pay attention. Let's say, for example, a father wants to take his child and he's moving to Mecca, for example. He's moving to Mecca. And the airlines is safe, the way to get there is safe, and a father's going there to move, to live. Who has more of a right for the child? Does your child stay with the mother, or does the child go with the father? In this case, they mention فَأَبٌ أَحَقُّ بِالْحَضَانَةِ. In this case, if the child's under 7 now, we're talking about the under 7, not the age of picking, the under 7. In this case, the child has more of a right for hadana. They have more of a right to take their child to move if they're moving to another place. But why? The question now will be, why is that? They say, لِإِنَّهُ الَّذِي يَقُومُ بِتَأْدِيبِهِ وَتَخْرِيجِهِ وَحِفْظِ نَسَبِهِ. This is because if the father moves to another country or another city, and he's going to be living there, and his children are in another city or another state or another country somewhere else, they say that the child should go with the father because the father is going to establish teaching them proper mannerisms, take them out, teach them things, but more importantly, they say here, is preserving the lineage of that child, preserving that child's lineage. A person might say, well, what does that mean? How is that, being with the mother, the lineage won't be preserved? Because as we mentioned, when it comes to inheritance, the father's side is stronger. And if the father is with their children in a different place, the understanding is that the father is going to be very protective over his children. And if they're, we're Muslim, they're not going to have any girlfriend, boyfriends, all that stuff is going to be out the question. This is assuming that the father is upright. This is assuming that the father is upright. Then this is better for that child to be in that type of environment. And it says, فَإِذَا لَمْ يَكُونَ الْوَلَدْ فِي بَلَدِ الْأَبْ ضَاعَ. Now he said, if the child is not in the same place as the father, then that child will be left astray. This is what the fuqaha say. This is not my speech. Brother, where you get that from? I'm not saying this. This was mentioned over 800 years ago. That if a child is not in the place of his father, then that child will generally be led astray. So some people might shake their heads and say, no, that's not true, brother. Well, let's look around us. Let's look in the prison systems. Most of the young people that are in prisons, if you ask them about their fathers, they don't know. They don't know who they are, and they don't know where they are. This is the reality in our communities. Most of the guys that get in trouble, if you ask them about their fathers, they're not around. Right or wrong? A lot of the men that are somewhat successful, for the most part, if you were to do a comparison between men that are successful and men that are not successful, generally speaking, the ones that are successful, their fathers played a role. I'm not saying that mothers can't raise their children, the boys, and no, I'm not saying that. Just looking at a ratio. Through my limited life experience, most of the men that I met that fathers weren't in their life, they don't turn out the way the ones who had their fathers in their life. This is in general. I'm not saying that there's no, and some of you that are older, you probably can attest to the same thing. طيب. So it says, وَأَمَّا إِنْ أَرَادَ أَحَدُ أَبْوَيْنَ السَّفْرَ إِلَى بَلَدٍ غَرِيبٍ لِيَسْكُنَهُ أَحَقٌّ. However, if one of the parents now want to travel to another place, but the place they want to travel to is close, it's not far in that you don't shorten your salah, then the mother has more of a right to the child. Is that clear? If they're not traveling far, they're traveling, from here to, for example, from here to Laurel or DC, for example. No, you guys don't generally shorten your salat going to DC, do you?
Yeah.
All of you? No, some of you don't. So if you take the position that you don't, then generally speaking, everybody doesn't agree with that, do they? You shorten your salat going to DC? Yeah? Huh? That's a whole nother conversation. Sure. Well, how do you shorten your we'll get that's a whole nother subject. You open up a whole all right. So at any event, the mother here has more of a right to the child if one of the parents are moving and they're not moving too far and that child is still in a state of hadan, they're still under the age of 7. Okay? So in this case, the child will go to the mother or remain with the mother. وَتَبْقَى عَلَى حَضَانَتِهَا لِأَنَّهَا أَتَمَّ شَفَقَةً. And this is because, as was mentioned before, the mother is generally better for the child when they're under the age of 7. There's no doubt. There's no difference of opinion among that. وَإِنْ كَانَ السَّفْرُ بَعِيدٌ. If the person is traveling far, وَلَكِنْ لِغَيْرِ سُكْنَةٍ. So say, for example, a father is traveling to a place, Morocco. A father is traveling to Morocco for some time, but he's not going to live there. He's just going to be there for a month or a month and a half to handle some business or what have you. فَمُقِيمٌ مِّن وَالِدَيْهِ أَوْلَى. Whoever from the parents are established in their home has more of a right to that child then. What does that mean? Say, for example, right now, the child is under 7 and they're with the mother. Okay? They live in Baltimore. The father says, I want to take my child, I'm going to be going to Morocco for a month, or 3 weeks, or 2 weeks. Or I'm going to, for example, I'm going to California for a week, 2 weeks. In this case, the parent that is established and has a home, the child should stay with them during that period. All right? This says the muqim is awla. In other words, the child has more of a right to be with the one that is firmly planted instead of moving them around and stuff like that. طيب. So now the issue now is al-hadana lil-muqim li-abawain. So then the hadana here is to the parent that is firmly established in a particular place. فإذا كان الأب في بلد والأم في بلد. If the father's in one city and the mother's in another city, فحضانة تكون للأب. So that the custody goes to the father, as we mentioned. If the mother's in one city that's far and the father's in another city that's far away, then the custody goes to the father in this case. And this is تكون الأب خشية أن يضيع نسب الطفل ببعده عن والده. And this is due to the fear that the lineage of that child could be affected due to the distance that that child is away from his father. Now, this is something that is very important that I'm about to mention here, because I'm sure some men have tried to do it. Ibn Qudaamah, he died in the 7th century, the 8th century, right? He said, قال ابن قيم, لكن, he said, however, لو أراد الأب الإضرار, if the father moved to another place for the purpose of harming the mother, because this is what some men do. Some men do this. They want to move to another location for the purpose of harming the mother. I'm going to take my kid, I'm going to go over here and, just because of you, I don't like you, and so I'm taking my child going to another location, right? فاحتال على إسقاط حق الأم من الحضانة. And he's doing this treacherously to remove the rights from the mother so that the mother can't take care of the child. فسافر ليتبعه الولد. So he travels for the purpose that his child can come with him. Right? He says, فهذه حيلة مناقة لما قصده الشارع. He said, this here is treachery and deception, and this is not what the Sharia has come with. If a person does this, this is treacherous, and this is not what the Sharia has come with. فلا يجوز هذا التحيل على التفريق بينها وبين ولدها. And therefore it is not permissible for the father to do this for the purpose of separating him, the child, from the child's mother. From the purpose of separating him from the child's mother. And it says, وَتَفْرِيقٌ تَعِزُّ مَعَهُ رُؤْيَتُهُ لِقَاؤُهُ. And he says, to leave him, taking a child, it'll be hard for the mother not to see the child, and it'll be difficult for her. And it'll be painful for her that if a man takes his child and leaves for the purpose of harming the mother, this is something that is painful for her. It says, فَقَالَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. And so the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he mentioned about the fathers or the men who do this, trying to cause harm to the mothers. He said, مَنْ فَرَّقَ بَيْنَ وَالِدَهُ وَوَلَدِهَا فَرَّقَ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ أَحِبَّتِهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said that whoever separates a child from their mother, whoever separates a child from their mother, Allah will separate that person from his loved ones on the Yawm al-Qiyamah. Allah will separate that person that did this from his loved ones on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Is that clear? طيب.
You said that was a hadith.
It's a hadith. You can find it in Tirmidhi. Hadith you can find in Sahih Tirmidhi. طيب. So then, the issue now of the kids selecting the parents, of the children selecting the parents. الصبي قبل سن التمييز عند أمه بالإجماع علماء. Then a child that is before the age of tamyiz, before the age of discernment, 7, as long as she's not married, as long as she's not married, the child goes with the mother. This is a scholarly consensus on this issue. فإذا بلغت سن التمييز, if the child reaches the age of tamyiz, the age of discernment, in other words 7, then that child goes with, or the child has a choice. If it's a male child, and if it's a girl, then she goes with the father.
Now, what's the difference between tamyiz and puberty?
Mumtaz. So the Shaykh, he asks, what's the difference between tamyiz and puberty? Tamyiz is when a child generally is able to know right from wrong. Generally, have some being able to distinguish between men and women. how they look, how men look. You know, they have certain faculties that are with them at the age of tamyiz, because tamyiz means age to distinguish. So once they reach the age of distinguishing, then this is called the age of tamyiz. Puberty is when they are mukallaf. Mukallaf, which means that the rules of Islam now are applicable upon that person. They are now considered technically an adult in Islam, in that 5 prayers are obligatory. Everything that's obligatory upon you is obligatory upon them at the age of puberty in Islam. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No.
طيب. So then, with regards to these issues, they say that another reason, a benefit now, we get back to the daughter going with the father. It says, إِذَا تَمَّتْ لِلْبِنْتِ سَبْعُ السِّنِينَ صَارَ حَضَانَتُهَا لِأَبِيهَا. If the girl or the daughter reaches the age of 7, then the custody goes to her father حَتَّى يَتَسَلَّمَهَا زَوْجُهَا, until she gets married. She goes with her father until she gets married. لِأَنَّهُ أَحْفَظْ لَهَا, because this is more protection for her. However, فَإِنْ كَانَ الْأَبْ, if the father كَانَ عَاجِزًا عَنْ حِفْظِهَا, if the father is not able to care for her, if the father is not able to care for his daughter or provide for her, أو يهملها لإشتغاله عنها, or he's negligent of her because he's busy with something else, or قلة دينه, or if his religion is deficient, والأم قائمة بحفظها قدمت, and the mother, and she's able to do all those things, then the daughter now belongs back to the mother. Is that clear? Is that clear? Yeah. So essentially, if the father, he's not handling his responsibilities, his religion is weak, if that makes sense. His religion is not where it needs to be. He's prevented, or he's not able to care for his daughter the way that he needs to. Then in this case, she is returned back to the mother. What if the
mother's religion is weak also?
Then we have the order that was mentioned before. طيب. قال الشيخ التقي الدين الشيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية, he says, إذا قدر الأب تزوج بدرة. So say for example, now here بدرة, it can mean if the father takes another wife. If the father takes another wife. If the father takes another wife, وَتَرَكَهَا عِنْدَ هَذِهِ دُرَّةً, and he leaves his daughter or his child with his other wife, وَلَا تَعْمَلُوا لِمَصَالِحَتِهَا, and that new wife, she doesn't do the things necessary to take care of the child. بَلْ رُبَّمَا تُؤْذِيهَا, perhaps the other wife harms the child in one way. أَوْ تَقْصِرُ فِي مَصَالِحِهَا, or she is negligent in doing the things that child needs in terms of care. فَأُمَّهَا تَعْمَلُ مَصْلَحَتَهَا, and if the mother of that child does the things that child needs, وَلَا تُؤْذِيهَا, and the mother does not cause harm to that child, فَحَضَانَةَ لِلْأُمِّ قَطْعًا, so then the custody goes back to her mother over anyone else in that case. And the purpose of which here is نَظَرًا لِلْمَصْلَحَةِ إِذْ هُوَ مَقْصُودٌ مِنَ الْحَضَانَةِ, because here in Islam there's a principle. Islam generally always looks at the masalih and the mafasid. It looks at all of the pros and looks at all of the potential cons. The origin here, the intent behind the sharia here, is to preserve that child. So if that child ultimately is going to be preserved by being with the mother, then that's where the child will go. That's where the child will go. طيب. It says, وَمَشْهُورَ مَذْهَبْ أَنَّ حَضَانَةَ الْبِنْتِ بَعْدَ تَمَامَ سَبْعَ سِنِينَ لِأَبِيهَا. And this is something that is famous in the madhab of Imam Ahmad. Once a daughter reaches the age of 7, she goes back to her father. And this is because, generally speaking, they're looking at the pros that comes with that, the assumed pros that coming with that father. However, as it relates to individual situations, then every situation has to be looked at specifically. As the ulama always mention, rulings are generally al-hukm al-am. In other words, the ruling is for the general masses. They don't create rules. Rules are not made for the exceptions. Rather, the rules are made for what sends to fit the majority. When a situation comes up that goes against the norm, then it has to be looked at specifically in every case. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Follow Sheikh.
I have an example. The real example. Suppose there's a daughter, she's in her teens, let's say 18, the father beats her. And she doesn't have a Muslim mother or any Muslim family. She just has the Muslim father who has custody of her. But he beats her. And she wants to get away from the father because of physical abuse. Who does she go with?
SubhanAllah. Allah.
I guess
That's something that issue right there is something, like I said, whoever, if that's a real case, then obviously you have to make, as we learned yesterday, you have to make tahqiq. In other words, you have to verify that this is actually taking place. Once that information is verified, then you have to get people that are knowledgeable about that issue to sit down and make mushawara. And then if they can't figure it out, they can't figure it out amongst themselves, the proper hukm shar'i, the proper legislative ruling on this case, then they get in contact with those who are more knowledgeable than them. Call some of the scholars of Islam and explain the issue to them, and perhaps they can come up with a solution. But just off the top like that, I don't know.
Well, would she be wrong to go to the authorities in the country like America?
I mean, if she's
Child Protective Service, would she be wrong in doing
I
that?
can't say that. I can't say that. Me personally, I gotta look at the situation. I can't, everything is hypothetical. If there's a real situation, we can sit down, discuss it. It's a couple of brothers here, look at the situation, see what it really is, talk to her, talk to the father. Maybe we can sit them down and talk to him. Maybe sit the father down. Listen, brother, what you're doing is not right, and this is the situation. If you continue, persist, and authority's going to be, whatever the case may be, right? So Allahu Alam. What I'm saying is each individual case has to be looked at individually. Everything that we're covering here is all general. It's all general. It's nothing. Okay, so you look at, this applies to me, then it fits. No, maybe it doesn't, right? But the rules are generally put in place like that. At any event, with that, I'm going to end this on this note. Child custody laws in Islam are not black and white. There are general rules in place. Generally, this is what happens. 1 + 2 = 3. For example, this is a general rule. However, sometimes you might get situations and scenarios that's not cut and dry. It's not black and white. So based on that, you have to use the rules that are in place. And this is the thing too. When it comes to asking scholars in Islam about issues, what they would expect from a student of knowledge and people that are in those positions is that they do their due diligence. And what they mean by due diligence here is doing your own tahqiq of the issue. In other words, looking at it in detail, gathering up all the information, all possible loopholes that you're able to do on your own. So when you actually bring it to that scholar in Islam, they know that this person did his due diligence and that he presented the issue the way it should have been presented to them in the first place. Sheikh, this is the situation. Boom, boom, the father we met with them, we talked to the father, according to, we researched this issue about this in the kutub of the fuqaha. They say this, Imam Ahmad says this, and this Imam Hanifa says this, Imam Shafi says this, I found it in this book, blah, 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 blah. And this is the conclusion we came up with. What do you think about this? Do you think this is correct? If yes, alhamdulillah. If not, why not? How can we fix it? All of this, bearing in mind we live in an environment where XYZ takes place. All these things have to be put together. This is why some of these answers aren't just snap the finger. No, because this is Allah's religion. It's not a game. It's not. When we become Muslim, we accept all of Islam. We don't say, I'm going to drink this part, I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to do this, No, we got to look at all of it. We got to take our time with it. We can't be mustajal. We can't be quick in levying out rulings. And as we learned yesterday, giving a fatwa on an issue like this is amrun alim. It's a major issue. You sit here telling, brother, go to the authorities. And then later on you find out, man, maybe you should have talked to him. All he had to do was talk to the brother. Now he's sitting in prison. For example, I'm not saying what he did wasn't wrong, but he could be reprimanded from the brother. Look, man, what you did was wrong. You know what I'm saying? Brothers are going to sit you down and talk to you about it and so on and so forth. The whole point is when you have these issues, there's a protocol in place, or there should be a protocol in place, how we should deal with each other. We should sit down and we should have mushawara. The students in that area should talk among themselves. There needs to be a committee of the tulab, the people that study Islam, to come together and look at these issues. These are issues that affect our families and affect our lives. It's not a game. As soon as a husband and wife get divorced, they shouldn't run to the courts right away. We're going to take you to court and get half all your money. Sister, slow down. Slow down. Pump the brakes a little bit. Let's look at it. Bring it to... And brothers got to be just. Brothers have to be just. If you know what's in the Quran and the Sunnah, then you got to say what's there. You got to be just. At the same time, you got to look at the situation in clarity, with a clear mind, and understand what's going on. If it's not something that's easy that you can figure out, take it to those who are more knowledgeable. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. In any event, there were some questions here. Even these issues here, so there's a general question. The general question, what's the ruling if the mother gets married and the father is sinful? All right? If the mother gets married and the father is sinful. Just like here, if the father is sinful and he has a problem with his deen, as the fuqaha mentioned, the mother is put forward if the father is sinful. But you have to be verified that the father is sinful. You might not like the father, he's sinful. What's the gauge? How do we gauge that he's sinful? Because you said he's sinful? No. We have to make ithbat. We have to make ithbat. Ithbat is we have to verify information. We can't tell how the father's sinful, you say so, class. The next question is, what if the children want to stay with the mother? What children? What's the age? If they're over 7, no problem. If they're under 7, they're supposed to be with the mother. If the daughter, maybe the question is, if the daughter wants to stay with the father, according to Imam Ahmad, la. The daughter goes with the father. However, at the same time, if the father is not able to, then you understand how the cycle goes? So when you look at these issues, you have to look at each one specifically.
But that question that you just had, if the daughter let's say the daughter's supposed to go with the father, that's clear. But let's just say she don't want to go with the father. She wants to stay with her mother. She don't care if she wants to go with her father.
The daughter doesn't have a choice. According to the school of Imam Ahmad, the daughter doesn't have a choice. But the person that's listening to that case, if it's a case, then he might want to listen to what's your reasons. Right? Because Islam says this. Now, she might say, well, because X, Y, Z. According to Imam Ahmad, the daughter goes with the father. However, this is not absolute. It's not an ijma that the daughter goes with the father. Perhaps there are cases where the mother can be put forth depending on the situation. Is that clear? And so you have to look at it. Everything you have to look at in detail. It says, what if the girl wants to stay with the mother at the age of 7 and the father is sinful? Same thing. Same thing. If the father is sinful, we have to verify that he's sinful. If it's verified that the father is sinful, then here in America, there really needs to be a committee here, especially here in Maryland. There's enough brothers here to study. There should be some type of committee where these issues come up. The parents separate. Their case should be brought in front of these people, and they should sit down and hear it and look at it and make tahrir. In other words, yuharrar al-mas'ala. Look at it, figure out why there's a problem there. What are the components that are contained therein? If they can't fix it, then they go to the scholars before people go run into the court systems. Before people, well, my daughter, I'm going to the court system. I'm going to the court system. And this is something that we have to respect our religion. It's easy for us here in America to be disobedient to Allah. Everything around us is aiding us in disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything. Right? So it's upon us as Muslims to look at these issues and try to take them to the proper people, or have them look at it, and if they can't solve the problem, take it to the people of knowledge, or have them take it to the scholars of Islam, but explain it in detail. That's just being fair. طيب. Anything else? تفضل.
You said that if a boy chooses the mother, then he stays with the father in the day and then the mother at the night. But what if they're in two different countries?
If the father lives in another country?
Yeah.
So then, based on what we covered today, what do you think the answer is?
You said that you talked about under 7.
If the father moves to another country.
No, if the mother moves to another country and he wants to stay with the mother.
If the mother moves to another country and the child, the boy, wants to stay with the mother. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. I don't know. I gotta look at that. I don't know. That's an interesting question. If the mother moves to another country, because the origin is this. The origin is that if the parent moves to another country, then the father takes the child. If the father moves to another country. If the mother or the father move to another country, in general, the child goes back with the father. That's the general rule. That's the general rule, that the father goes back. But if the mother moves to another country and the child wants to stay with the mother, does that child still get the same choice? That's the question. Does the child still get the same choice once they reach the age of 7 and their parent moves to another country? Can that child decide to move with the mother or not? Allahu A'lam. That's a good question. Mumtaz. He said, what's the difference between the two issues? The first issue is, if a parent wanted to move to another country, that's Musafa Ba'id. It's a far country where you have to shorten the salah. In this case, and they're moving there to live, then the father has more of a right to the child, because so that the lineage don't become lost. You with me? If they're moving somewhere in the same city, this is when the child is under 7. We're talking about under 7. If the child is under the age of 7, if he moves to another country, the father has more of a right for custody here in this case. Is that clear? Tight. The next issue, what he's saying is, what if it's after the age of 7 when they choose? So if the boy picks his mother, for example, and the mother moves to another country, does she still keep custody in this case, or does it return back to the father? In other words, does it take the ruling of before 7, or does it take the ruling after 7 when a child picks? That's his question. I don't know the answer to that. That's a very good question. Does that make sense, or are you still confused? You still confused?
I thought he was just changing who was actually traveling.
Yeah, I thought that at first too.
Yeah,
But yeah,
sounds like you just said that the mother is leaving.
No. What I said makes sense? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
That was the question. Yeah, that's what I thought. Because it's two issues here. The first issue is, if the child is under 7 and the father wants to travel, or the mother wants to travel, to move to another case, to another state, if there's any separation from countries or places, then the father has more of a right to the child if they're under 7. This is a general rule. But once the child reaches the age of 7, they pick and choose which parent to live with. His question now is, what if they pick the mother and the mother moves out the country? How does that affect the father now? Sir? Allah. I can give you what I think, but that's not a place to think. I have to look that up or ask.
You mentioned earlier about the chain of for lack of a better term, I'm going to say the chain of adults who have custody rights if the one above them doesn't is unfit. In this country, they have like foster care and boys' homes and stuff like that. Where does this fit in with the Islamic position?
Mumtaz, that's an excellent question. If you're asking, is it possible to put a Muslim child in foster care? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean,
if I'm understanding from you,
that's part of it. But I want to know what did Islam, say about these type of situations. I mean, there's like in Islamic countries, most of the time there's going to be some family blood relative
Mumtaz.
that's going to be available here in America.
So let's good. I'll mention. Okay, so I'll talk about the issue of foster care, because there's even Islam also discusses that in general. So we actually studied this with some of the mashayikh about foster care in America. In America, if there are Muslim children that are in foster care and they don't have anyone in succession to take them from that list of family members, and there's a Muslim kid that's in foster care, then they say it's obligatory for Muslims to get involved in foster care to take these Muslim children. Obligatory.
So is that
For the one that is able to do it.
Is that incumbent upon the community or the individual Muslim?
It's a fardu kifaya. يعني إذا قام به بعض سقط عن الباقين. In other words, if some of the people come up to do it, then that sin is removed from the rest. That's actually an issue that we actually discussed in school. Foster care in the U.S. A lot of times when we talk about these issues, a lot of times they're all dealing in Muslim societies. So I always bring the questions of what about in America where we live? We don't have Muslim family members to take children. If, say, for example, the parents die and you got the kids, they're orphans, and they go into foster care, and they're Muslim. What do we do about that? Is that our responsibility? Yes, it's the Muslim's responsibility to care for your own, no doubt. No doubt. If a brother or sister is able to get into that and they're fit to do that, then they have to be able to do that. Someone should do it. Now.
I worked in that system. And what they do, they see here in Maryland, is the first protocol is that they have to identify a relative, hopefully a Muslim relative. But in the absence of a relative who's ready, able, and willing to take care of the child, then they go into foster care. Now, foster care is the last resort after they've eliminated or ruled out relatives.
So basically everything we're saying is in general. The specifics of how the law is set up, that's something that the brothers here that are from here can sit down and look at the laws and discuss those things. The point being is that as Muslims, we need to be aware of what's going on around us. We need to be aware of these laws. We need to be aware of all these different situations that are going on. It's upon us. We live here. We need to know what's going on. There's no way it should be Muslim kids in foster care. So no way. And if they're in foster care and they're getting adopted by non-Muslims, this is an atrocity.
One other thing, the Jewish people, they have their own social services system.
MashaAllah.
So that is a message to us that maybe we can work with these.
Well, I mean, we need brothers to put that together. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, because I think it's very, very important, just in conjunction with what the Sheikh was saying. I mean, because once we try to attempt to implement what we're learning here today, then these issues are going to come up.
They become real now.
They become real where now the community has to say, okay, so I want to do, like, for example, you mentioned the case with the Sheikh mentioned the case with the girl. So now you get involved in that situation, and unfortunately the child has to be unfortunately, if she had to be removed from that situation, where we should go, because if she's under 18.
So here's the thing. The reality is this. All this information that we're putting out is for the purpose of having in your idea that Islam didn't ignore this issue here. Whether you got all of what I said or some of what I said, at least you're going to know Islam talks about custody. We need to find out more about it. Each case is an individual issue. And I'll give you an example. In Islam, there's a ruling in Islam, al-hukm al-ghalib. Al-hukm al-ghalib. And what this means is that the ruling is for the general. So let's say, for example, they say that America is a Christian country. America is a Christian country. This is al-hukm al-ghalib. Most of the people in America are Christian. Yes or no? Yeah. However, are there Muslims living in America? Yeah. Yes. Is the rule put in place for the exception for the general masses? It's general masses. So therefore, it takes that general ruling. Everything we're mentioning here is for the general ruling of child custody. However, are there exceptions to that? Absolutely. What are the exceptions? We have to hear them. Like what you said. Like what he said. All of these are considered exceptions to the norm, and therefore you have to sit down and look at them. Each exception, you have to look at it. And there have to be people that are qualified. There have to be people, students in our cities and our communities. This is very important. These should be people in our towns, our cities, our communities that understand the issue. Why is that? You can't get on the phone and contact a scholar if you don't understand the issue yourself. As the ulama of Islam, they mention a principle. It's called al-hukm ala shay far'un an tasawwurihi. In order to give a ruling on something, you must be able to visualize it and understand it to its fullest extent. How can you convey information to someone else and you don't understand it in totality? That's the issue. So therefore, when it comes to these issues, it is upon those students of knowledge to hear these cases, take notes, write it down, discuss it among one another, see what you guys come up with. Then once you come up with your own conclusion based on your own independent research, contact those who are more knowledgeable than you and tell them what you came up with. This is what we arrived at based on XYZ if you don't come up with a decision on how to fix the situation. This is the way Islam should be done here. This is the way the ulama explained to us. This is the way you guys have students of knowledge there. And as many of the scholars used to tell us, Ahlu Mecca adra bi shi'abiha. The people of a place are more knowledgeable of their place. The people of their place are more knowledgeable of their place than we are. And as one of the Mashaykh mentioned to us, he said to us one day, he said, what was the purpose of you guys coming here? If you wanted to just learn Arabic, go to Egypt. Go to Egypt. If you wanted to study Arabic, you didn't have to come over here and study fiqh and usul and all this. No, go to Egypt, study Arabic, and go back and be a translator. But if you wanted to study deen, then you're going to be accountable for the knowledge that you study, and you have to go and help your people with the knowledge that you have. It is upon that student of knowledge to know his level. Once you reach to an area where you know, I only go this far, then you have to be honest with yourself enough to say, I don't know. Take it back to those who know more than him. This is an amana. Studying Islam is an amana. It is a trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. I can sit here and lie to you because I can sit here and say, I really don't know this issue, but I'm going to just come off the top with it, and because I don't want to look bad. This is Allah's religion. If I don't know, I don't know. That's cool. I'm safe. But we can go get the answer. Let's come together, figure it out, write it down, ask the questions, and let's get the answers. Right? So, once again, before I finish up, just a reminder that Islam, studying this religion, is a amana. It's a trust. This is a trust that Allah has given us. This is not a game. This is not something that we just, the hadith sheikh said. No, these are real life situations that people need real life help in. Women have children. Men have children. Families are split. Children are hurting. Parents are hurting. These are real issues. And it takes serious people to look at these issues and try to find out what's best for all the Muslims involved. This is serious. This is not a game. At any event, it's time for the salat. We're going to start with this. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're going to get ready for the brother. His lecture is coming up next, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.